Hello and welcome to another episode of Ewell Acres. Today we're going to continue with our discussions about beekeeping, and not only just about beekeeping, but we're going to be talking about different ways of how you can get bees now that you've decided that you want to go ahead and jump into that wonderful world. Let's get started. So, you decided that you want to go ahead and start your beekeeping adventures, and you're wondering, how is it that I actually go about acquiring bees? Well, there are a couple different ways that you can go about doing that. Some of them are going to be a little bit less expensive or a little bit harder. Some are going to be a little bit less expensive but harder to do. So, we're going to go ahead and talk about a few of those different things and the advantages and disadvantages of those. So some of the different ways that you can go about collecting is going to be getting a swarm. You can purchase a package of bees. You can do a nuke. If you've already got some bees, you can do a split, or you can get a split from one of your buddies, or you can go ahead and purchase a full hive that's already established. So we're going to go ahead and talk about some of those different ways to do it, what the actual definition of what those things are that I mentioned, and the advantages and disadvantages. So starting off, we're going to go ahead and talk about doing a swarm of bees. Now, doing a swarm of bees is by far the cheapest way to go about doing that. And what a swarm is as a hive is getting ready to build up in spring, eventually they're going to run out of room. So, what you do then is the old queen and about half of the bees fly away. And they go and hang out on a nearby tree or another location and sit there for a couple days, or could even be a couple hours, while they send out scouts to search out a new home. Now that could be a hollow in a tree, that could be another hive that's set up, different ways like that. And you've probably seen the advertisements of, it's swarm season, please don't spray, you're going to kill the bees, don't worry, they don't have a home. Well, that's what they're talking about, is just this swarm. So one of the great advantages of it is these bees are out, they're just trying to find a new home, and this is by far the cheapest way of going about doing it. You can set up what's called a trap box, where you throw in some grass, lemon oil, essential oil, or there's actually small little pheromone trap so that you can set in these boxes to encourage them to come and collect it. Or if you're feeling a little bit braver, then you can go ahead and get a shop vac that's battery powered, or if it's within range, go ahead and just start sucking up all of the bees, and you can collect your swarm that way. So that is by far one of the easiest ways to do it. Some of the downsides are it's not always reliable. You may or may not get a swarm, and it's kind of a hit or miss, and there are already going to have to be bees in the area from some other location to do it. So that is kind of your off and on. The other downside potentially is that you really don't know the genetics of the bees. You don't know the history of it. You don't know what species of bees they are, and you're just kind of taking a shot in the dark. But it's free, so you really can't complain. But there is also another advantage, though, that these bees are a swarm. They are from an already established colony, so you know they made it through the winter in your local area. They are already from a strong hive, meaning they are probably a strong group of bees themselves, and that's why they've left home, because there was no more room for them to hang out. So you know they are most likely going to be of good stock, even though you don't know the specific genetics of them. The next group that you can go ahead and do is something that is called a package. Now, what a package is going to be a queen inside a small little queen cage, and it's going to be approximately 3 pounds of bees put in a small little plastic or wooden box. This is typically going to be purchased online, and you can receive it in the mail, or there are a bunch of local beekeepers where a part of their economics, they sell packages. Now, where do these bees come from? Well, what you're going to do is you take a mated queen, stick her in a queen cage, and then you can take bees from any one of the hives and just take a whole bunch of them, throw them in a box, and you stick the queen in, leaving her separated from the hive for a period of several days, so that way the bees get used to that pheromone scent of the queen and will eventually accept her as her queen. So, some of the advantages and disadvantages of this. The disadvantage is, or the advantages is, you don't have to have a pre-existing hive. You can literally get it from anywhere in the US, from your local beekeeper, or anywhere. It's a very, very mobile way of bringing bees in. And the good thing is bringing these bees in, it's going to be one of your cheaper options. As of 2020, in my area, you can purchase a package of bees in the $140 to $150 mark, depending on who you're looking at. But that's of the spring of 2020. So it often varies based on your locality and the cost. But as far as things go, it's relatively cheap. The other thing is that you're going to know the specific genetics of that. So some of the disadvantages it is a brand new hive with a brand new untested queen. Potentially, the bees will accept her as a queen. Potentially, they won't. There's a chance that they may kill her when she's released. There are things that you can do to heavily negate that by, like, putting a piece of marshmallow in with the cork. So that way, when you go to try and release the queen, it will take several days for the bees to eat through that marshmallow or piece of candy, whatever you've got blocking that, so it gives them time to get used to that pheromone scent. Another thing is when you're putting the bees into a new hive, oftentimes they are not going to have any food store supplies, and so you are going to have to do some massive supplemental feeding. It is very likely that you won't get a significant crop off of that hive because it is a brand new hive. Not a big deal, just something to keep in mind. Another thing that could potentially be a disadvantage of is if the bees decide they don't like the new home that you stick them in, they could decide just to fly off, which is a possibility. But you know what? Overall, that's not as likely as long as you give them a good home. You can do some things to negate that when you go to put your frames in, rub some wax on it, make it a much more friendlier home. So, moving on to the next location of type of bees of how you can acquire them is getting a nuke. A nuke is going to be very similar to a package. The main difference, though, is a nuke is basically a starter hive. You're going to have typically how most nukes occur is going to be 5 deep frames or 3 deep frames that are drawn out, has the wax already drawn out. The queen is inside this hive and is actively laying. And so you do have a small starter frame. You can purchase it as a small box or like a waxy cardboard frame that the bees come in and go. When they go to purchase it, they seal up the front. You pick up that whole box. You then bring it home. You lift the frames that are already in there into your own hive. It's very mobile. It's a little bit more expensive. In my area, kind of give you an idea, the price of a nuke ranges from about $180 to $200 depending on where you're getting it from. But you know for a fact that it is a laying queen. She is actively producing, and it is a great starter hive. You're going to get a very strong production out of that this year. The other great thing about it is you're most likely going to know the genetics and stock of that, and most likely it is a hive that's already established, working strong, and been taken from or developed from a previous hive that's already kind of established, and so you know that it's probably going to be a relatively strong hive to easily get going. The next group that you can do it from is going to be similar to a nuke, and that is what's called a split. What a split is you take a few frames of brood, you take some frames of honey, and you take some empty frames and stick them in a new box. It is almost exactly like a nuke, except for the fact is that you may or may not have an actively laying queen. You're just going to take an established hive and split it into 2. This is probably one of the more expensive routes that you do as a preventative maintenance from doing a hive. The downsides is it is going to be a little bit more expensive, and it typically is not as mobile. It's going to have to be from a pre-existing hive that's already there, strong nearby. This works great if you have your own hives and you just want to double your hives or kind of maintain it, or if you have a buddy close by. Typically, splits are going to be a little bit more expensive because they're going to be larger in bees in size of a queen, and so that can be some of the good points and bad points of a split, but it's basically just a bigger brother of doing a nuke. The next one that you're probably going to come across is getting a fully established hive. Now that means you're going to be purchasing a whole package. You've got your bottom board, your medium frames, or your brood boxes. Potentially you're going to have some honey supers in there. You have an inner cover, top cover. It is a fully established hive. Now there are some, why would you even want to do this? Well, you may not want to do this because it is a fully established hive, and that can be very, very expensive. In my area, the average going rate for bees ranges from about $300 to $320. The good point is, though, that you also have a lot of your equipment. So if you aren't familiar with some of the equipment and you want it just to get good going, then that's a good way to do it. You have a lot of your baseline equipment for your hive that you will need. And a lot of times people that get established hives like this are going to be able to say, have it from their mentor, hey, I want to buy this hive from you, leave it on their property, and you have a mentor right there that can kind of help you go through the process. So those are some of the great advantages of it. You also have an already established strong hive going with a laying queen, and you're most likely going to get a significant crop of honey that year because it is already a large established hive. Now, the biggest advantage of it, like I already discussed, was it is very expensive, and by far the most expensive way to go about doing it. One of the other downsides to it is it could be a good thing or a bad thing depending on how you're looking at it, is it's very helpful for beginners to get going in being able to get their bees established, but at the same time, it's not going to give you as much of a potential learning curve because everything has already been done for you. It makes it a little bit more difficult. You're not able to see the growth of the hive, the growth of the curve. And so if you do go the route of purchasing a fully established hive, generally speaking, you'll want to have a mentor side by side to help explain things to you so you understand the life cycle, the early spring buildup, the drop off for the hive, those type of things. So those are some of the disadvantages and advantages of having a fully established hive. So there is one question that I commonly get that kind of deals with all of this. And what is the one that's going to be best for you? Well, take a look at your own personal circumstances, your finances, and which one you think is going to be best. If there's any other methods I missed, go ahead and mention it in the comments below and help us out. What type of beehive do you want to use? Go ahead and let us know. Now, there is also one more thing that I get asked frequently as a beekeeper. Well, we have all these bees. You have a queen, you have all the bees itself. That's rather expensive. There's actually another method that I've seen how I can purchase bees. Why can't I do that? And the method that is 9 out of 10 times mentioned is I see a lot of beekeepers or other places that actually physically sell bees just selling a queen itself. Why can't I just buy a queen and then have her start laying, have her go out, collect some honey, collect some things as she's building up the frames? Well, normally that would be a good idea. I have a lot of friends say, I see that with wasps and hornets all the time. You have the queen, she goes out, she starts laying, and then collects some honey, or she collects the food resources and gradually builds the hive. As the hive gradually grows, the queen will focus her attention between care and laying to solely laying as the hive exponentially grows. Well, that doesn't quite work out when you're dealing with honeybees. Honeybees are a much more fragile integrated system, and unfortunately, the queen for honeybees has to have other bees to take care of her, because her sole and single duty is to lay eggs. She is a birthing machine, where if you have a strong hive, she will lay anywhere between 1,500 and 2,000 eggs a day, roughly, off of various reports that I've seen. So that is why it's important that she has helper bees to not only take care of her, but also take care of all the eggs that she's laying. That's why you can't just go and buy a queen honeybee and then let them get going. It's most likely that she's going to die. You have to have a small, significant group of honeybees that are able to take care of her. Now, it's true that if the queen bee herself dies, they can go ahead and start getting a new brood, start turning one of those into a queen and produce a new queen out of a hive that is queenless. But you can't just take a single queen bee and turn that into a hive. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. And so it's important to kind of take a look at those things. It would be nice if you could just spend $50 or $45, however much a queen bee is, and then have a full hive off of that. But unfortunately, the queen bees need a lot more personal care than, say, a wasp does. Well, thanks for joining us as we talk about our different subjects. But there's one more thing that we actually have to talk about. And the question is, okay, great, there's these different methods of how I can buy honeybees, what they are potentially are, but where is it that I can physically go and purchase bees? Well, luckily, that has some simpler answers, and there's a lot more closer by than you think. If you wanted to go the method of swarms, if you're lucky enough to have natural bees in your own area for honeybees that have been released in the wild, take a look around. Maybe you'll actually find one, and that way you can get it for free. One way that you can do it is go and talk to a local beekeeper or a local farm and feed store. A lot of those different guys will actually have bees for sale in a couple different methods. These personal methods where you go and get it from a personal beekeeper in your area or a local farm and feed store that sources from local beekeepers. That's my preferred method of doing it. So that way, you know, the bees are from your own regional area and they're actually climatized to your area. More of that on another video of what kind of bees you want to get, species, things like that. You want to get a bee that is climatized to your area. It's going to have a much higher success rate. So when you go to purchase bees, one of the questions that I always encourage guys to ask before you get your bees is, where are these bees coming from? If you're in the much colder climate, and let's say you're in the United States and a vast majority of the bees are sourced from Georgia or Florida, well, they are able to get their bees up nice and early. But have those bees ever survived a harsh winter where you're going to be getting 2-3 feet of snow? In my area, where I live, it is a very, very cold climate. And there are some times when you can get feet of snow in a single storm. And so it is very important for me to try and have bees that are able to be sourced from that local area. So that way I know they're actually going to survive a very cold winter. Another option that you can have, which is nice living in modern times that we have, is in most places around the world, we have access to a really great thing called mail. And you can literally have a package of bees shipped anywhere in the world to ship it to anywhere in the world. And so if there aren't local bees in your area, you can actually bring them in, and hopefully they'll be able to survive the winter. They can become climatized to it, and after a couple generations, you will actually have your own bees. And if you wanted to get into it, then you could become that. If there are no other bees in your area, then maybe you could become that local beekeeper and have for part of your side income to support the hobby, where you actually sell packages and nukes. So that is one thing to think about, and a couple different areas that you can actually get bees from. Well, where is it that you get bees online? The simplest thing that I would suggest is go ahead and get on Google and go ahead and type bees for sale. And undoubtedly 10, 15 different places will pop up that actually sell them. In my own regional area, I know of at least 5 to 10 beekeepers that actually sell packages and nukes out of their own apiaries, or there are dozens more that you can get from online who are willing to ship in many places in their own country, and a lot of places in other parts of the world. The downside is if you're getting it from a different part of the world, is you may have import laws and other licenses and fees that you have to deal with for the transfer of a live animal. But there are many options out there, and go ahead and do the one that works best for you. Once again, thanks for sticking with us today as we talk about the different ways of how you can get some honeybees now that you've decided you want to go ahead and do that. So, thanks for watching and listening with us. Don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell. We're going to come out with new subjects to talk about and how to further increase your knowledge, not only with beekeeping, but with hydroponics, general farming, and many other subjects. So once again, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.